Today, we become legends.
Build review. Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to Inter Games for a different kind of video this time. I've had a lot of people requesting that I should, go over the builds at the end of videos, and while I'm probably not going to do that for every single, gameplay video that I post to this channel, I feel like going over a few of my most recent videos and going over all the builds at the end of the game and telling you what I think about them, whether they were good, whether they were bad, what could be improved on them, and stuff like that. I've had a lot of requests for this kind of thing, and it feels like perfect second channel content, so if you guys do go on to enjoy this, then definitely let me know down below, drop a like on the video and stuff, and I can make more of these, as I put out more gameplays on this channel. So yeah, if it's useful to you, definitely drop a comment, drop a like, all that kind of stuff. So first up, we have the Kukulkan game that I posted recently. I'm not going to go over my build, because obviously I think my build is good. That's why I built it. Moving on to the Ullr though, this build is pretty much perfect, I would have to say. I think the one thing that I might do is replace the Fail Knot with a Jotuns and move it up in the build, so you would go Trans, Jotuns, Hydras, and then Crusher, Heartseeker. Personally, I do prefer Jotuns on Ullr. I do like having the Lifesteal glyph on it. I think that's really nice for him. And also the fact that it comes with flat pen allows Ullr to kind of get online a little bit earlier. Once you've got your Transcendence and your Jotuns online, you kind of start doing big damage with Ullr. But Fail Knot is absolutely fine. It's generally a better, overall item than Jotuns. It has better stats on it overall, and towards the late game, having that crit can be really nice as well. And it's kind of a debate. There are a lot of hunters that are better with Fail Knot because, of course, Ullr doesn't, have control over when he's going to proc that Fail Knot, whereas a lot of other hunters that use this item, like AMC or Marty or whatever, they have complete control over when they're going to be using it. With Ullr, the passive, you kind of just, it procs whenever it's off cooldown, basically, because you're stand switching so often and you don't have quite as much control over it. And I do like the flat pen and the glyph on Jones. So that's probably what I do, but honestly, this build is fine. If you like Fail Knot on Ullr, I think it's honestly almost as good as Jones, and this build is pretty much fine. Moving into Sobek's build, I like this one as well, I have to say. Personally, I don't like Blink on Sobek. I think you don't really need it. You're really just looking to get in with the pluck. And yeah, you can Blink pluck, but if you're comfortable hitting max range plucks anyway, you don't really need to Blink. Oftentimes if you're blinking the full distance and then plucking the full distance, your team aren't going to be in range to follow up anyway. And if you're blinking to just pluck in melee range, you may as well just pluck anyway, as long as you're confident and be able to hit those. So personally, I would have not gone Blink and gone something like Shell in terms of the relics for this Sobek. The build itself is fine though. Personally, I do like the Sentinel's Embrace over the Heroism, but it's very much personal preference. I think Heroism is still really good. That Max Health Shield is super useful in the late game. Pribwin, great on Sobek. The build has 30% CDR. In fact, does Wingblade? I think Wingblade has CCR, doesn't it? Yeah, so the build has 30% CDR, so you can take 10% on your buff if you want to max that out, or you can just stay at 30% and take health on your buff and be giga tanky. Pribwin super good on Sobek, as I mentioned. Stone of Binding really good on Sobek as well, because it procs when you pluck someone in. You get that extra flat pen for your teammates. Really good there. The Wingblade is quite useful here as well, because they had a Cerberus, they had an AMC, a couple of really annoying slows there. So yeah, overall, no real problems with this Sobek build. Personally, I do like a bit of Spirit Robe action on Sobek though, instead of Mantle, just because if you do pluck in and then immediately get CC'd and they try and nuke you down, the Spirit Robe mitigations can be quite useful. But other than that, nothing really wrong with this build. Moving on to Kuku, I think this build is mostly fine. The Divine Ruin last item is a little bit weird. I'm guessing this is mainly because he sort of figured out later in the game that you kind of need that anti-heal. Generally, you're not going to want to go flat pen last item, and he should have got this Divine probably earlier in the build, either going double flat pen or just swapping out the Spear of Desolation for it. Got 30% cooldown in there, so as long as you take 10% cooldown on your red buff, you'll be absolutely fine. Something I'm not a massive fan of is the Meteor Rod. I actually don't think it's that great on Kukulkan. It is good in the scenario where your 1 is your first ability you hit, because the slow is enough to connect the Meteor, but if you're just throwing out tornadoes for poke, or if you're just landing a raw ult on someone, you're not actually going to be able to get the hit of the Meteor Rod. So personally, I would prefer to go the cooldown rod on Kukulkan here, but this is kind of fine still. Obsidian Shard is generally the best percent pen option as well for Kukulkan. You don't really want to be going Charon's Coin in this guy, because often you're just hitting big fat raw ults, and you want that Obsidian Shard to be adding that 20% pen to the ult, so you can absolutely delete people with him. And the one thing this build is missing really is the Reaver, and so what I'll probably do is, if you did need the Divine, which against this team I'm not sure you really do, AMC's healing a little bit from lifesteal and stuff like that. Ravana has a little bit of healing, so does Cerberus, but I don't think it's significant enough that you really need a Divine in this build, so I would just swap out the Divine for Reaver here. But if you did feel like you needed the Divine, you can swap out the Deso for the Divine and then just go a Reaver at the end. I feel like you probably do want Reaver in that build. And finally, Osiris's build, I think is pretty much perfect. I don't think I would change too much here. Of course, he was laning into a Cerberus in this game, so he went Shoguns first, but if you're laning into a Warrior, you would go Berserkers first and just kind of swap the order of these around. Prophetic Cloak, super insane on Osiris. He already works well with stacking mitigations, and his 1 just kind of stacks this thing for free a lot of the time with the amount of poke you can throw out. Acts of Animosity, obviously, TP for the laning phase and then Blink. You do kind of want Blink on Osiris to be able to engage. Your only other way in really is ulting or just running at people, so having blink on him is nice. The one thing that I personally might change is taking out the Archdruid's Fury and either throwing in something like a Frostbound Hammer for a little bit more control, potentially even a Stone of Binding for a little bit of the pen, or you could even just go for a Spirit Robe just to get a little bit more mitigation stacking or something. I am a fan of Archdruid's Fury. I do think it's great. I don't really think it's a big problem in this build. I think it's absolutely fine, but there are a couple of other options you could go there. Moving on to Cerberus's build. So he has a Gem of Focus here, which I think is the way to go. You're going to want that Conduit Gem for the early lane clear as a Guardian solo, and then this is definitely the best upgrade. You're not going to be wanting Archmage's Gem because it scales off of your power, obviously. Something I would have liked to see on the Cerberus is a Blink. I do think you kind of want Blink to be able to engage with Cerberus with the ult rather than having to jump in, especially since they made that change where you can ult people and then jump afterwards and pull them further. You know, you can Blink ult them and then still have your 3 up to do it to be able to do that. The Breastplate I think is fine. The Mystical Mail is a little bit weird. Personally, I don't think Cerberus needs the Mystical Mail. He doesn't really need it for the lane clear. He does a lot of damage anyway. I don't absolutely hate it, but if you are gonna go Mystical Mail, it has to be a rush. This has to be your first item. I don't think it's worth building Mystical Mail later in the build like this Cerberus did. I don't think it gets that much value. Void Damaru, great, obviously essential on Cerberus. It's going to be boosting the rest of your teammates' damage, like the Thoth and the Khepri or whatever. Not that boosting Khepri's damage is very important, but it's also going to be boosting Cerberus's damage quite substantially. It's a really efficient item on these kind of picks. The Genji's Guard is fine, I guess. I'm not a massive fan of it in this kind of slot. I don't think our team was dealing like that much magical damage overall in this game. I think he was more so worried about the Ullr and the Osiris. But yeah, it's kind of okay, I guess. And then Stone of Binding is fine as well. Cerberus has plenty of CC to be able to activate that. Next up is Ravan, who I think his build is a little weird in certain ways. Similar to Kukulkan, he has this really late game Brawler's Beat Stick, which I don't really think he needed. We didn't have that much healing on our team. In fact, we had pretty much nothing at all. Ullr didn't go like Jotun's Vigor or Soul Eater or anything like that. So you're basically just looking at like Sobek 3, and that's, I think, entirely it on this team. So Ravan really didn't need this Brawlers. Also, Hydra's on Ravan is kind of bad in my opinion as well. Ravan's not particularly a great, like, auto-attack canceller. You kind of just want to get in there and dump your kit. You're not necessarily auto-attacking a lot in between your abilities, so I don't think you get that much value from Hydras. The Jotuns is fine. The Heartseeker's fine. The Serrated Edge is basically essential in any assassin build to get your percent pen online. And then Seer of the Jungle. Personally, I don't like this item in, like, mid to high level, like, casual play. I don't think it's that good. It's really good in SPL play, of course, being at Sea Wars and stuff, but I would just go for Protector of the Jungle here, get you a little bit more tanky. And unfortunately, my cam is covering the bottom 2 builds. I can't actually see what they were going to be, so we'll just finish off with the Khepri here. He didn't quite get to full build. I'm going to assume this Storm was probably going to be Stone of Binding towards the end of it, though. Again, the Contagion, I don't think you really need it. Yes, Contagion has secondary value that's quite good with the damage ticks that it provides, but I don't think they really needed the anti-heal against this team. We really didn't have that much healing. Pribwin on Khepri is also not something I'm a big fan of. I think Pribwin you kind of want on characters that are going to be, like, getting in there with their ultimate, and that's not what Khepri does. You know, he's going to be saving a teammate. You're not necessarily going to need that shield if you're saving a teammate. So personally, not a big fan of the Pribwin. The Prophetic is fine. Khepri stacks Prophetic pretty easily with his 3 from range, and sometimes his 2 as well if your 3 is not off cooldown. And then Thebes is fine, of course. Heroism is fine. So overall, not that bad of a build, but Pribwin on Khepri I'm not a big fan of, and I don't think he needed the Contagion either. Alright, we're moving on to the King Arthur game that I also posted recently, so we'll start off with Serqet's build here. This is questionable, I will say. Relics are fine. You definitely want Beast Blink on Serqet. Bombus Sphere also fine in my opinion. Serqet's not really a great Bombus Hammer user because you generally don't want to be like auto-attack cancelling between every ability for Serqet because that reduces the value of your passive. You want to stack up all of those poisons and then auto them once after the combo. You don't want to be like AoE cancelling, so Spear is definitely better than Hammer in this case. The Rage first item, unless this was like something that she bought and then sold at some point, which I doubt it, Rage first item on Serqet is not really something you want to be doing. Yes, she synergizes with crit fairly well, but the fact that she's gone Jotuns after Rage, you should just go Jotuns first. The flat pet is so valuable in this meta, so you would definitely want to swap those 2 around. Serrated Edge is good. The Deathbringer is probably the wrong glyph in my opinion. Yes, Malicious Deathbringer is good on this kind of a pick, but I just think Devoted Deathbringer is better at the moment in terms of just amping up your crit chance. Serqet gets free crit chance from her ultimate, so there's a good chance he would have gone like to about 100, maybe even a little over 100% if you went for Devoted Deathbringer here. Heartseeker is fine for a normal Serqet build, but I feel like with this crit build that he was going, you're probably not getting all that much value from the Heartseeker overall. It's still a fine item. You're still going to be meeting the power requirements for it and stuff like that, but I really don't think it fits in this kind of like a crit Serqet build. If you're going normal ability based, this would be absolutely fine. But to be honest, I'm just not really a fan of this like full crit Serqet build anyway. I think if anything with Serqet, you just want to go a Deathbringer and that's it. You just want to amp up your passive crit chance that you're already getting for free and then just go for a normal like Serqet build. I don't think you really need the Rage here, and you especially don't need it first item. Moving on to Medusa. She went 8 and 22 in this game, but her build is actually fine in my opinion. I think this is pretty perfect. Fail Not is great on her. She's one of those gods that like engages mages with her ultimate, and then you can immediately follow up on that target with the bonus crit chance, so I think that's absolutely fine. She's sitting on max CDR. She's got Heartseeker and Crusher for duality, which is what you kind of need, and of course you're rocking that bluestone as well. This build is basically perfect. The only thing I might change is I will put the Heartseeker before the duality, just because once you've got the duality online, yes, you might have your bluestone done at that point, but honestly, you probably won't for a little while, so you probably want the duality after the Heartseeker, but other than that, this build is perfect. Next up is Athena. Sentinel to Embrace is fine. I think this is my go-to support starter at the moment. I think this is the best one, but of course, Heroism is still good, as we mentioned before. Prophetic is okay. Personally, I don't think Athena stacks Prophetic that well, but if you can hold your reach basic attacks, you can just kind of like throw those at people as you're walking past, and she can stack it fine, so I think it's fine here. Binding is great, although what I probably would have done is delayed this in the build one slot and gone for Thebes here. I think Thebes is just ridiculously efficient, and you can stack it so easily as a support. I don't think there's any reason to not have Thebes in any support build at the moment. So yeah, this should probably be Thebes. She has Erosion in here as well, specifically because they were dealing with the Nike. That's the reason she has that. Magi Shelter is fine as well. This is not something we particularly see picked up a lot. Maybe the Athena was getting focused out a little bit, and so she wanted that Magi's bubble, and of course you can spread them to your allies as well. And finally, Spectral Armor. This was to deal with the Mercury going crit, so naturally you're going to want to go for a Spectral Armor there. That's good counter building skills. And finally, we have the Scylla. She went alt timeline into Book of Thoth, Spear, Shard, Reaver, and Staff of Myrden. So there are some issues in this build, in my opinion. Personally, I'm not a big fan of timeline at the moment. I think you'll be much better off just getting that CDR already online in your build. She has 30% CDR here. She could have 40% with Pendulum, and I think that will be much better. However, I would also remove the Staff of Myrden. Scylla is not a good user of this item, in my opinion. Her ult is often like being used to completely kill someone, and you're not really following the ult up with bonus damage, and the staff itself doesn't boost the ult damage. I feel like if you are a user of Staff of Myrden, you have to have your ult damage be boosted by that in some way, you know, like Janus, like Thoth, like Mercury. Not Mercury, sorry, like Vulcan. Both Roman gods, at least. Also, I'm not a massive fan of Reaver for Scylla. I really don't think she's a Reaver user. I am a big fan of the item in general. I think it should be in like 90%, 85-90% of mage builds, but Scylla is a specific one that I don't think uses Reaver that well. And that's because she's not really throwing out poke constantly, like into the backlining and like or the front line and farming Reaver value. She's really just looking for that one opportunity to just get a 1-2 combo on someone and just completely blow them up. And I think Polynomicon is a much better way of doing that. So in my opinion, this Reaver should be Polynomicon and probably shifted one slot forward in the build and move the Shard to 5th slot. Shard I think is fine on Scylla. You are really looking for that like 1 or 2 ability instant burst damage, so Shard is generally going to be better than Coin in that case. So yeah, basically replace Reaver with Poly, move it up in the build, put Shard in the 5th slot, and then I would just say replace the Staff of Myrden with a Rod of Tahuti. They provide similar stats in terms of like they both have percent pen. There's no cooldown on it, but if you're going Pendulum, you're going to like make up for that cooldown. You'll still have 30%. You can get to max CDR with a cooldown reduction on your red buff. And you can go either Rod on Scylla, in my opinion. Rod of Meteors is generally better because you can very easily confirm it. You know, you throw your 1, you're going to guarantee that extra Meteor damage. So yeah, you go Rod of Tahuti here and then just replace the Reaver with Poly and move it up in the build and replace the timeline with Pendulum, in my opinion. Moving on to Mercury. Relics are fine here. Protector of the Jungle is also fine. I think this item's pretty solid at the moment, but you can also go for like a Bomber Spear on Mercury if you want to, though I am a fan of Protector on him. The Rage Rush is actually fine, in my opinion. I criticized it for Serqet, but I think for Mercury it actually is a lot better. You can get this thing stacked up quite easily, and the actual stats that it provides are quite good. It does have quite high power on it. And since like the removal of Stonecutting Sword, the removal of Golden Blade, you don't really have like an effective rush option for Mercury anyway, so going Rage here is fine, in my opinion. You can also go Equinox here, but Rage is fine too. Serrated is a little early in the build, but I can't really see any way to get it later in the build with the way that this guy's laid his build out. You know, if you're not going to be going like an Equinox or something in the first slot, you kind of just are forced into going Serrated here unless you want something else more luxury in that slot. I guess you could move up the Demon Blade. But yeah, in terms of the core crit chance that it has in his build, this is perfect in my opinion. I don't think you want Bladed Boomerang particularly on Mercury. It can be good, but the extra percent pen that comes from Wind Demon is really nice as well. And then the Assy last item is the only real problem that I have with this build. I don't think you really need this, especially in last slot. I would much rather see you go for something like a Bloodforge that is still going to be providing you that lifesteal, but it gives you a little bit more safety. You know, if you're ulting into the backline as Mercury, you can get like a Bloodforge proc and sort of like reset yourself. Moving into Nike, so this was obviously a very unorthodox build. I believe the Nike was like mid in this game or something like that. It's not a traditional Nike build, but in terms of like being a damaged Nike build, I think it's absolutely great. I love this build. Arendite, super good on Nike. You know, once you drop your ult, you can absolutely chase people down. It's a tiny bit lacking in percent pen. You only have 20% pen here, but generally as the Nike, you're going to be going for the squishies anyway. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And then like the build is just great here in my opinion. Next up is Fenrir. He's gone for a War Banner, which is good in my opinion. The Runeforged first item is probably just like something that he really wanted to pay off in the early game. Personally, I wouldn't just like completely rush this in the support build. You're just going to be like really not tanky. And I think that's part of the reason why his Fenrir had 18 deaths. He was kind of feeding in the early game because he just wasn't tanky enough with this Runeforged rush. I don't hate the Runeforged on Fenrir in general, because he does have a lot of, like, you know, he's going to jump in and proc it, or he's going to ult you and proc it. I think it is pretty good, but you might want to delay it in the build a little bit. Prophetic Cloak on Fenrir is something I'm not a fan of. He did manage to get stacked in this game, but it was an extremely long game. You just don't have a consistent poke option on Fenrir to be able to do this. Oftentimes, you're sitting on 5 runes, and so if you want to, like, burn your jump just to get a prophetic stack, you're going to be burning those runes and stuff as well. Like, generally, Fenrir is not a good prophetic user. This should probably just be Gauntlet of Thebes, and then maybe the Runeforged can be in that slot. Soul Eater, I don't know why this is here. Maybe at some point he just got bored of playing support, decided to go damage. I won't build this on Fenrir in general. I definitely won't build it on support Fenrir. Archdruid's Fury is kind of fine in my opinion. It is a little bit damage heavy for a support Fenrir build specifically. If you're going solo, this is absolutely fine. But again, this is probably just like he wanted some damage in his build because he was tired of playing support or something like that. And then he's gone for Magi's Revenge as well. That was probably just some kind of like specific counter tech because he was getting like Serqet ulted and Athena taunted on cooldown or whatever. So yeah, overall, not a great build. You definitely want more tankiness in your build than this. Scrap the Soul Eater, replace the Prophetic Cloak with Thebes. You can probably keep the Archdruids and the Magi's if you really want them, but just add a little bit more tankiness in your build. Maybe grab like a Spirit Robe or something in there in place of Soul Eater. Alright, next up is a Wukong game from a little while ago. First up, we have the Thanatos build, which is Bumper Spear, Jotuns, Hydras, Brawlers, Serrated Bloodforge. This build is pretty godlike in my opinion. I don't really have any problems with this build. Personally, I do like Bumper's Hammer on Thana because he has really good air cancels and I find a lot of value in that, but Spear is not bad by any means. I just think Bumper's is like ever so slightly better. Bumper's Hammer, that is specifically. Jotun's Vigor, obviously, pretty much the best rush in the game for any ability-based jungler. That's pretty much what you're doing right now. Hydras is good. He has really good air cancels, as I just mentioned. Going into a Brawlers here is also fine, considering they had a Ra, a Terra, and a Kali. Like, you definitely do want a Brawlers in this build somewhere, so a very smart pickup from Thana there. Serrated core in every ability-based assassin, and honestly core on basically any assassin in the jungle, even stuff like Kali and Bakasura will probably want this item. It's just really efficient for the percent pen and other stats that it gives. And then a Bloodforge, great for Thana in my opinion. He's all about like getting those kills, resetting, his cooldowns, re-engaging and stuff like that. Bloodforge allows you to do that. So this build is perfect in my opinion. I wouldn't change anything except maybe personally I would go Bumper's Hammer instead of Spear. Next up is Sobek, whose build is also pretty good aside from like one weird order lull. I don't know why he has Spirit Robe first item. I'm not sure if he had something else here that he sold. Like maybe he had like a tier 1 earring for MP5 that he sold late game or something. I'm not entirely sure what went on here, but if you did rush Spirit Robe, you don't want to be doing that. Prophetic is kind of okay on Sobek. I'm not a massive fan of it personally because he doesn't have an easy way to stack it, but you can just like run up and 3 or 2 people. It's not absolutely terrible, but as you can see, he didn't even get stacked in this game. Thebes is great. Obviously, you would just move these items up in the build and move the Spirit Robe probably down to like where the Thebes is right now at the very least, maybe even a little bit later. Pridwin, as we mentioned before, is absolutely fine on Sobek, so no problems there. Sobek did go Spartan Flag here, which I'm not like a massive fan of. I think War Banner is just a better option. Spartan Flag is really hard to make use of, so you probably go War Banner here, but I think in general, all of the starter options for support right now are very viable with their good upgrade. So like War Banner for War Flag, Heroism for Compassion, and Sentinel's Embrace for Sentinels. Pridwin, as we said, was good, and then Stone of Binding also really good on Sobek. So in general, it's just a bit of like a weird order, and I'll replace the Spartan Flag with War Banner in this build. And again, we mentioned this before, but I don't think Blink on Sobek is actually that good. I think you don't really need it. Moving on to Vulcan. So Gem of Focus, I think is great for Vulcan. You can go Pendulum if you want as well, if you want a little bit more CDR in your build. As you can see, Vulcan is a little bit lacking on CDR, and you generally got to make up the CDR somewhere else in your build with like maybe a Pendant or something like that, or a Murden. Speaking of Murden, you should have it on Vulcan in my opinion. It should probably be where the Soul Gem is. You can replace that 10% CDR with Murden and you're going to get a lot more value there. You'll also up your percent pen a little bit, which is a tiny bit lacking in this build. He's got plenty of flat pen with a Spear and Divine, which of course Divine, similar to the Brawlers from Thana, very essential against this team. They have a Ra, they have a Kali, they have a Terra. Charon's Coin, personally I think Shard is good on Vulcan, especially for like your ults. You know, if you're getting like a max range ult, having essentially 60% pen on that ult if you're at the cap already. This guy wasn't, but if you are at the cap already and you get that 20% bonus on like your Vulcan ult from max range, you can just delete even tanks with that because you have 60% pen. And of course, percent pen applies before flat pen, so you're reducing by 60%, and then you're also reducing by another 40 because he has 40 flat pen in this build. It can hit really hard. So personally, I prefer Shard on Vulcan, but Charon's Coin isn't really particularly bad by any means. And then yeah, Soul Gem, I'm not a massive fan of on Vulcan. This is a very niche specific item that you only want on certain picks like Janus or whatever, because you can proc it by going through portals and over his own threshold. So yeah, this Soul Gem should definitely be Murden. Other than that, I don't have any particularly massive problems with the build, especially with the improvements to the totem system. Now you can actually get 15% cooldown on your buff. So honestly, I think going 20% CDR builds is a little bit underrated at the moment. So if you replace this Soul Gem with Murden, you've still got that 20% cooldown. You can get up to 35 in the late game by having a tier 3 cooldown totem on your buff. So I think that's actually kind of fine. And yeah, I do like the Doom Orb Gem of Focus. It makes Vulcan super slippery and hard to deal with. The double flat pen, you could skip out on the Desolation if you wanted to and wanted to slot in something else in your build, like maybe a Rhoda Tahuti later on or something like that. But I don't hate the double flat pen. We're in a meta right now where people have much lower protections. I think the double flat pen is absolutely fine. And finally, we have Neith. So this build is pretty good other than, like, why did it have Blackthorn in there? I honestly have no idea why there's a Blackthorn in there. Maybe he just got, like, a little bit clapped early game and wanted a little bit of extra health to live. I don't really know. This Blackthorn should just be Transcendence and be moved in front of the Jotuns, and then this build is absolutely fine. I think she is a pretty decent duality user, so yeah, just replace Blackthorn with Trans, move it up in the build by 1, and move the Jotuns over to where the Blackthorn is. Next up is Ra, which is a complete shambles of a build. I mean, you can see he went 0-10. I don't think he's particularly good at the game. I think it was a Ra solo as well that completely bodied with Wukong. So that's why he's got like a breastplate first item. Already most noticeably is the fact that this build has 50% CDR. So even if you go into timeline here, you're going to have 50% CDR. If you go into pendulum, you're going to have 60% CDR. So overcapping cooldown already, which is terrible. Book of Thoth third item. If you're ever going this item, you need to rush it. You need to get those stacks online. Don't build it third item. Doom Orb, again, it's not a stacking thing like Book of Thoth is. Of course it does stack, but it's not in the same way. But Doom Orb, you're going to want to be a rush with this item in general. It's going to be like your first item power bomb. It's got flat pen on it. You're going to want to rush it. You're not particularly going to want to build it in force slot. This lost artifact, I imagine, is probably going to be like a Rhoda Tahuti. It's already got pendant. Maybe it will be like a Charon's coin or something like that. I can only speculate. Moving on to Terra's build. So she went for Benevolence as the starter. This could be upgraded to either of them, I think. I think both Benevolence upgrades are actually quite good at the moment. I do prefer Heroism, but Compassion is also really good. Thebes Rush is fine. Terra, not really a big Prophetic Cloak user. You can't really... I mean, you can throw out the two. Yeah, to be fair, you kind of can. You can get away with Prophetic on Terra, so if you wanted to do that as well and delay the Thebes, you could do that. Personally, I don't go Prophetic on Terra. I like the Thebes Rush. Lotus Sickle, really good. Probably core on Terra, in my opinion. Just super good. She has an easy way to proc that. Amulet of Silence is interesting. I haven't really used this item too much. Maybe it's better than I think it is, but I'm honestly not a massive fan of it. But I guess with Terra, it can be nice for like your CC chains. You know, you can sort of like root them and then silence them into the stun, stop them jumping away or something like that. It can be pretty good. Emperor's Armor, again, I'm not a massive fan of this item. I don't really use it very much, but I guess, you know, they were kind of getting dominated here. Maybe she just picked up an Emperor's Armor sort of later in the game to like try and like stop our sieges or something. I'm not particularly opposed to it. Moving on to Janus. So this build is a little bit weird, but not honestly as terrible as you might think. There are definitely some issues with it though. So Gem of Focus, go this on Janus every single time. If you're not going Gem of Focus, you're trolling on Janus in my opinion. He stacks it super easily from his portals and stuff like that. And the movement speed is super valuable to him. The Conduit Gem is also really nice for his early game clear. He does suffer a little bit in the clear department, and you don't really want to be aggressive portaling the wave too much because you make yourself vulnerable, so having the Conduit Gem clear is nice for early game. Charon's Coin, this is just never something you should build on Janus because of the 20% pen that he gets for free. If anything, like before they gave him the free pen, you would want Shard on Janus anyway for your big fat ults through the wall, so you won't be going coin anyway. But you don't need a 20% pen item on Janus. You just simply don't. Chronos Pendant should probably be his first item. I think Chronos Pendant is fine here because you're not going Pendulum and you're going to need to get CDR somewhere from your build. So I think rushing Pendant is fine. You could also rush the Doom Orb that he got third item as well. That's also fine. There should definitely be some kind of flat pen in here though. So you should basically take out this Charon's Coin, shift up like the Doom Orb and the Chronos Pendant, and then get like a Spear of Desolation or a Divine Ruin in there in my opinion. Rod of Tahuti is fine. I think Rod is really good on Janus. You probably want to be going the cooldown glyph because you don't particularly have an easy way of like getting access to the Meteor. I think Portal does it, but you don't really want to be aggressive portaling too much on Janus in the late game. You're mostly just like running around ulting and 2ing people. And then this gem was presumably going to be Staff of Murden. I think you want the Murden a little bit earlier in the build. Last item is just kind of bad because Janus relies on this item so much. It just amps up his damage an absolutely enormous amount. But yeah, you can see that if you are going Rod and Staff of Murden, which I think you should be going both of these items on Janus, you're already at 40% pen because of his free pen that he gets from his ultimate, so you really don't need this Charon's Coin. But I think we'll end it there for this preliminary sort of dipping my foot in the water of the build review series. If it's going to become a series, if you guys enjoy it, I'm absolutely down for that. I got plenty of other games to go over. Of course, I post on this channel like almost daily at this point, so I got plenty of games to go over. If you guys are interested in this series, I can definitely make more of these. But yeah, hopefully you guys found this insightful and useful, and I will catch you guys in another one tomorrow on Into Games. Peace.